This is a weekly Zoom discussion where we cover all topics really, so whether it's business, personal, but we just thought at the moment, with a lot of uncertainty in the world, especially with COVID, but obviously since the George Floyd death, a lot has come up, and we just thought we have to speak about it really. And I think the question is about, how is Britain divided? How is the world divided? Do we believe there's a division? Do we believe it's actually bringing people together? Not just on race, but on a number of things. And it's been a hard period for everyone, really. So 3 months. Are we coming out of the COVID period, together, or more divided than ever? So I'd just like to put that question straight away, really, to Sangeeta, and just get your feelings on it.
Hey, Dan. Thank you. It's a very interesting question. I think it's a bit of both. I think we're united in a way that we haven't been coming out of COVID or coming out of the lockdown. I think COVID probably is still around. And at the same time, there are things coming up societally, globally, that could divide us. And I think it's really still up in the air whether it divides us more than it has already. Just looking at the protests on Saturday, the people who are there supposedly to defend the statues, and then what that turned into. I think that creates division. I think the tearing down of statues may have created division. But I don't think it has to. I think, what it has raised predominantly is that there is a history that hasn't been recognized, that needs to be talked about. And I think what's going to have there be less division, especially in all the areas where there is dialogue, is communicating, is talking, like really looking, rather than just reacting. Let's look, do we want that statue there? Do we not? If we do want that statue there, what do we want to say about it? What context do we want to give it? I don't think you can erase history, but I think history has been written from a particular perspective. And I think it's now time to have a more inclusive perspective on our past as a country, for sure, but on a lot of issues. And I think that is what's going to have people come together and have more unity than division.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with the statues, I know that's been a huge thing, and at times I've had to, I'm not a big Facebook fan anyway, but at times I've had to come away, because sometimes it's difficult to read and see these things happening, and I appreciate everyone's point of view. I don't pretend to know what it's like for anyone else growing up in this country or how they feel. I only know how I feel. I think you're right. I think these things have got to be more inclusive. Someone raised in schools as well, that, and I certainly don't remember anyone sort of telling me about Martin Luther King and things like that in school. And again, they raised the good point, the other day that I read, and that is a good point. We can include these things, and there's but the statue is probably the one thing I've seen that the clear division, and it has been bad, and at times it's been peaceful and people have just had to say, but I think destroying it and setting out to do that, that's then creates animosity, and it can't not do. It can't not do, really. I mean, my granddad was, built ships during the war, the Camel Herds. I grew up hearing stories from him, the war, about being bombed, daily. He was going to work, not knowing whether he was going to live. You know, and they had an absolute purpose. That purpose was to keep Britain. And so, you know, I've got my feelings on it, but you know, I 100% understand what you're saying, and they absolutely should be more inclusive. But yeah, that's certainly something I have seen, that divide in. I'd like to go to Roger as well, about the same point in how you've seen divide, or whether you do feel you've seen divide, and you know, the causes you think of it, the real causes of it.
Right. Okay. Actually, when one thing I think about is when mentioned Black Lives Matters, I would say every life matters, because I remember when I came to this country in the 90s, and I had a discussion with a French guy, and he said to me, I have to move because I am being bullied all the time around where I live. I don't feel safe. And that was in Preston. So I think every life matters, yeah. Black life, Asian life, white life, every life matters, I think. But I can understand why they've used the word Black Lives Matters, obviously, because Black people tend to be targeted, I suppose, more than white people, but it can happen both ways. Like, and I remember that, I mean, that's about 30 years ago now. Yeah. So, and with regards to unity, but to take an example very close to us, I think this group we are having now, I've got the feeling probably this wouldn't have happened without the confinement, and for some reason, I don't know, something came together, and so Natalie came with that great idea of this coaching conversation, and maybe that would have happened maybe at a later date in the future. So I think in out of any situation, good can come out of it. That's what I believe personally. That makes sense, yeah. But there is a lot of and divide for me comes most of the time from ignorance and blame as well. It's easy to blame. It's easy to blame. So John mentioned it a lot. It's easy to blame somebody else or another culture or another religion for our own problems, because most people don't want to take responsibility, and most groups don't want to do that. It's always somebody else's fault. It's easier, isn't it? Yeah, and I think so. Blame ignorance. So because we don't know about a certain culture, we don't know about a certain way of thinking, and I think that will bring a division, and also politically. I mean, politically, they do it just because they want to stay in power. Yeah, so they will, for them, it's going to be easier to divide people so I can stay where I am. And they do it a lot. I mean, I'm not going to take any example and, and point the finger at any politician out there, but they do it all the time, don't they? But at the same time, I think there is a wake-up call for a lot of people.
Things, but it can be a complete culture, and it's when everything happened. I think there's always a trigger. There's usually a trigger in time that you can look back and say, well, that really made you sit up and think, well, what's going on? This isn't right. So, and that's why I don't want to keep going sort of back to race, but the whole George Floyd incident, you know, I sat there, and I love America. I genuinely do. I've been there an awful lot. I've got some American clients. I love America, but I sat there thinking, what the hell is wrong with you guys? Well, I don't get it. Why is race such a huge thing in America? What is the problem? And you know, that's a culture thing. So again, I try not to speak on things I don't know about. So I don't know what it's like to be a black person growing up in America, or a white person growing up in America. So that they've obviously created a certain culture over there. But yeah, I mean, it can be a cultural thing. You're French, or you know, a lot of I have Polish people who work for me. Incredible. There's never been even remotely an issue of race or culture, or you're from that country, we're from this country. You know, but I know it exists.
It does exist, yeah. And then a lot of people think, oh, they come over here, they take our jobs. But jobs only exist because there are people in a company. But you got your own company. I don't know how many people you employ, but let's say you employ 50, and if suddenly you lose 25 because you are supposed to give those jobs to British people, but you won't be able to produce as much with 25 people. So you will not be able to employ an extra 25 British if the other 25 being picked out. Does that make sense? Because your production will be lower. Yeah. So it's not a finite thing, isn't it? A job. And I think people say like that sometimes. It's just not. Yeah. And then you're probably more experienced in that than I have. Yeah. But anyway, so that's how I see it. But at the same time, confinement make me realize about little things in life. So, for example, rather than moaning about the dog next door barking, oh, great, it's barking, fantastic, I am alive. Yeah, so just little things like that. So that's anyway. That's how I say. I think most of the division is blaming ignorance. I think personally. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's some great points there. Joanna, I'd like to come to you and get your thoughts on it again about whether you think there is division. Roger makes a great point. It's not just a racial division. It can be a cultural thing, which, yeah, I think that we're more, what I would say is someone raised a point the other day to say that when our parents, grandparents were growing up, you know, if you are from predominantly a white area or black area, you don't necessarily have that, you might not see different cultures, whereas now with things like social media, and you know, kids are on social media, and you're getting to see, you know, black, Asian, white footballers, sports people, actors, and you're more familiar with them. So I think it's interesting what part social media plays in the whole thing, really. And that's like we've all said about Facebook, 1 minute you see something, you think, okay, well, that's a good point. And then next minute you'll read something, you think, well, no, that's crazy. You can't be like that. But so, Joanne, your views on it?
Well, I think on the social media side, obviously, it does expose a lot of things to a wider audience than perhaps we had in the past. That's a double-edged sword, though, because what you see on social media isn't necessarily the truth. It's just people's opinions. So I think what's important is if you do see something on social media that resonates, then you need to then go and find out more about it so that you learn more from it, and not just take what's said. Same with the newspapers. I mean, don't just take it as read, as it were. But what I was going to say was more about the whole time that we've had in the last few months. I think what we're seeing is that we've had communities come together. There's been a lot of good that's come out of this. People volunteering, people, you know, going the extra mile and all this. All the way through that, there's also been the minority that have just done what they thought. Nobody's going to stop them going out and doing whatever they would normally do. And it's the same thing now. I fear that a very good argument for the demonstrations and protests that we're seeing, which I absolutely understand and agree with, because the majority are doing it for the right reasons and they've got a good point to put across, and we do need to change things to move forward. But there's always going to be the minority that undermines it. And again, it's about people's ignorance, unfortunately. And unless
we have discussions where we can unpick the myths, if you like, it's never going to go away. And I think on a positive note, I think it was mentioned earlier that at the protest there are a lot of younger people there. I think that's a great sign, because they're going to be able to educate the older people. Because I know, going back to what you were saying earlier, Dan, about your grandfather working during the war, my parents were both in the war, and I know that obviously certain things stuck with them, shall we say. I remember taking my father to something in France, actually, and it was about the war. It was an anniversary, and there were a lot of German people there. And I remember him being really puzzled about why German people would want to go to an exhibition about, you know, the war. And I was educating him and saying, well, you know, they're not the people that were in the war. That's another generation. These people haven't done anything, and they've learned from it, and they're trying to learn from it. And that's what we all need to do, learn from the history, so that it doesn't happen again, or keep happening, as in this case. So I just think it is all about the debate, and people asking lots of questions, and people listening as well. Listen to why people have got these opinions, so that you can learn from it, and have that open debate. You know, if there's something that is really an irrational thought, as in some people, I would suggest in America, you can't believe certain things are actually being said and believed, possibly because of circumstances that they've had in the past and what they've been told. Education's a two-way thing, and I think we need to be open to it.
Yeah, again, there's great points there, and I would use, you know, anyone who's been to Berlin, for instance, they don't in any way try and hide the fact that the Nazi Party was based there, Hitler was based there. They say, look, this is our history. They have museums there that are dedicated to showing just how bad it was, so that they don't try and hide. But I think what you're absolutely right. They say, well, look, that was then, that was the history. Yes, it was appalling, but this is us now. This is, and you know, you do have to move on. And I think it's important as well that you know, people don't get too stuck in the past and say, well, hundreds of years ago this happened. So there is the argument as well about, okay, well, that's happened, but now let's come together, and how do we take it forward then? How do we improve things going forward? You can't improve anything from the past. You can't change anything from the past. The past happened.
Can I make a point about that, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We're all based in the Northwest. We're all based, you know, around Merseyside. And I think it's very important to, you know, what you just said about Germany and Berlin and not hiding from the past. I think it's very important that in Liverpool we have a slavery museum. I think it's very important that in Liverpool we have streets named after people that have, you know, fought against racism, like Steve Biko or Nelson Mandela. And I think, you know, in Liverpool, we have recognised that. I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm saying we've recognised it. And I think it's made a big difference to the community in Merseyside. And I think, you know, a lot of other cities could learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with that. I'd like to come to Basil. And again, there's been an awful lot of points raised, really. So no particular question, but just your feelings on, you know, how particularly the UK has been divided or come together, and you know how you see it.
For me, I think two points really. The first point is perspective, because you can look at the say, like going back to the statues issue. You could look at a statue and for someone whose family lived through the Blitz, they're going to look at a statue, and for them, the feelings it's going to evoke are about surviving the bombardment that came from Nazi Germany. So for them, they're going to take pride in the fact that we survived as a nation. But someone else's perspective, they might look at a statue and think he was a slave owner, he was this and that. So it's two different perspectives that are looking at something, but they're not looking at it with the same eyes. They're looking at it with different eyes. It's evoking different experiences, and none of them are necessarily wrong. It's just the angle that they're looking at it from. And then what happens is we get a narrative through the media, and sometimes it can come from government that it's one narrative. It's not one narrative. It's different experiences that are being thrown together that shouldn't be thrown together. I kind of look at it like in my family, if I look at my kids, all my kids are different. I can't have one narrative that can run down the line, because if I try that, one of the kids are going to tell me that I'm not being fair to them. So it's almost like looking at each individual case and saying, okay, I need to treat this as an individual case, and then look at it from this angle, and then find the balance in it so that we can not appease, but we can answer the question for everyone's valid point. And another thing that I would notice, I would say that I kind of get the vibe that the young people are fed up, in the sense of they've gone through the COVID, and even before COVID, I thought the young people were fed up because you had the young people, they stopped engaging with adults when it came to climate change, and they said, you know what, we're going to stop going to school. We are going to fight for our planet. So we're going to do it regardless of what you say. And the way that we're going to do it, we're going to protest in a way that is quite radical. We're not going to go to school on a certain day, and we're going to protest. And in that same spirit, I see that the young people, when it came to Brexit, they decided we want to remain. Even though the older generation might have been saying to them, you know what, leave, we want to leave. They decided to go against the generation and say, you know what, we are decided for ourselves because we're the future. And it's almost the same I see now after George Floyd was murdered, that these young people are saying enough is enough. And they're not taking direction from the older generation. What they're doing, they're saying, you know what, this is us. We're going to go out and we are going to protest. And I almost get the feeling with the young people, what they're saying to us is, you can either be part of our culture that we're creating because we're the future, or you could just stay there and you can be bitter and stay on the outside, but do what you want to do. But this is what we're doing. This is the kind of society that we want to see. We want to see an inclusive society where everyone gets an opportunity, where no one's judged by what color skin they are, what background or what economic condition they're in. But you know what? We all listen to the same music. We all dance to the same songs. We all watch the same movies. You know what? So why can't we all be treated the same? And it's simplistic, but so powerful. And for me, I was taken aback from going to the march, seeing 5 and 6 year olds. And it's almost like for them, this is the right thing to do. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it makes me question myself as well, because I know at times I've reacted in the wrong way to racism, where their reaction to racism is coming together. My reaction to racism would have been anger. And what anger is going to do, all anger is going to do is cause more division and more rifts. And what I see from this young generation, I see the opportunity for a real change, because they're not trying to change anything that is offensive. All they're saying is, we just want to be together and we just want to go forward together. So for me, it's like, I see out of the division that has been there for many generations, I see a unity coming, and it's a powerful unity, and it's very, very loud. And it's from New Zealand having the largest protest outside of the United States, to Norway having protests, to Germany outside the American embassy. Do you know what I mean? And it's not just the chant of saying Black Lives Matter, it's the fact it's who's saying it, why they're saying it, and the unity that it's bringing globally. Do you know what I mean? Where Brexit was a thing that was going to divide us and take us out of Europe, now we're seeing something that's globally uniting us, and it's driven by young people. So I just think there is, I can see the rainbow, you know what I mean? I can see the sun rising, and I'm excited. I'm excited because I really do trust this next generation coming up. Like, I trust my kids. I trust them to not see with eyes of division. I don't see they're going to see with eyes of separation. All I can see is that they just want their piece of the pie, and they want their mates to have a piece of the pie too. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and again, it's a great point, and it would be very interesting, really, to speak to youngsters. You know, as you say, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, and get an opinion from them. Really, how do they genuinely see it? I mean, I grew up, you know, sort of late 80s all through the 90s. And I personally can honestly say I wasn't aware of any issues or any divide. My background, I played basketball an awful lot as a kid. It's one of my very best friends who lived in my road, had a black dad and a white mother. It never, I can honestly say, you know, race never came into any of that for us growing up. We were incredibly competitive. At times we didn't like each other because we were so competitive. I wanted to beat him, he wanted to beat me, but it never came down to anything else. And he grew up in the same conditions I did. We all had nothing. So again, I personally never felt that divide. I spoke the other day to another group on Zoom about my inspiration from when I was a kid. So obviously I loved basketball. Michael Jordan was an obvious inspiration to me. I was into athletics. Michael Johnson, who, if you don't know, is an incredible American sprinter, dominated Atlanta '96, things like that. You know, Tiger Woods, things like that. So when people ask me about who sort of my inspiration was, it never occurred to me that they were black, and I can honestly say that. So it's for me, that's why I think it's strange. Where is that divide coming from? Who cares what colour you are? Who cares where the background is? So yeah, so I've got some, but I can't pretend that my opinion is going to be the same as someone else who grew up. They may have experienced a completely different way of life. So I don't consider myself old, and hopefully I'm going to be here for another 50 years. So I would, I like what you're saying, and I think we've got to trust the youngsters, because it is going to be them who take us forward. You know, there's a lot of life left in us also, though, so our opinions do have to matter. And I think it's perspective is a huge thing, isn't it? What wasn't a problem for me could be a huge problem for someone else, and vice versa, really. So it's always interesting, isn't it, just to hear. I love the fact that it's different opinions, and it's I do genuinely love that. And I think I've got nephews, and it'd just be interesting, really. It's not something I've sat down, but maybe after all this, just to, I wonder how they do see it. And obviously you've got kids, Basil, so it's an easy conversation. And you know, you raised it yourself. At one point it would have been anger, and you know, race angers us all. Really, that's what it does to us all. But maybe, you know, these kids who are 30 years younger than us, it'd be interesting to see how they see it, and hopefully that the new wave, you know, the new kids taking us forward, they just want an equal and inclusive world for everyone. And I think that's great, and that makes me feel, you know, more positive about the future as well.
Yeah, definitely, especially as they're willing to take responsibility, because I think in society it's very easy to be in a situation, look at your conditions, look at your surroundings, and look for someone to blame, because then you don't have to look at yourself in how I'm going to respond to this situation, whether in whatever manner and to whatever level you can respond to it. But it's very easy to blame. And to me, it's like playing Monopoly and having a get out of jail free card. Because as soon as I got a get out of jail free card in Monopoly, I act without restraint, because I know if I go to jail, I could just flash that card. And that's what happens when you blame. You can act without restraint because it's his fault. But as soon as you have to take responsibility, then it's a different thing. And I think going back to the whole George Floyd thing, Chauvin, I can't even say how to pronounce his name, but he has to take responsibility for the act of kneeling on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. He has to take responsibility, and it's no one else to take responsibility. He has to take responsibility, and that's the reality. And that's something that we teach our kids. If you do something, you have to take responsibility. So to me, it's just like, it's normal. This should be normal. What's being asked is nothing out of the norm. It's standards that we should be setting ourselves every day, and how we treat each other. So for me, it's like, more power to it, man. The young people are showing me a load of things, man. Watching them all just being together, and to me that's the essence of what family is, what unity is, what human beings, which is what we are. We're humans beings, is what we should be, man. We're just one tribe. We're just like the rainbow tribe, as they say. We're just a rainbow tribe, man. One family, but we're a rainbow family. And when people forget that, then that's when we should be like in shock. Wait, you're forgetting we're one family. I don't see lions in acting in that way. I don't see it happening in things that we say are lower than us. Lower species and lower life forms don't act in this way. So if we're the highest life form, we should expect the highest kind of boundaries asserted to us, because we are the highest life form. So yeah, more power to these young people. I'm happy with them, man.
Yeah.
Just to come back to that, Basil, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think what young people are willing to do that generations before them haven't been willing to do is be responsible. Just take on being responsible, as opposed to blame, as opposed to fault. They're just saying, okay, it's down to me. I'm going to save the planet, or I'm going to save the dolphins, or I'm going to stand up for, Black lives, or I'm going to stand up for equality. They're just being responsible, taking responsibility.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing, isn't it? And I think I think it's very easy to sit around, just blame society, and then say, well, there's no point me trying because nothing ever works, and look, that person's tried and he failed. So
don't worry, because I did like the way it ended with Basil's comments and sort of rounding it off anyway. So I think my point what I probably had was like in between sort of what Roger was saying and actually Joanne, in terms of, my granddad used to say about the newspaper, all you can believe is the date, and even that's wrong sometimes. That's how I was brought up. So thanks, Sangeeta, appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.